golden city of Jerusalem. For centuries, the heart of three of the world's greatest religions. Here, within a stone's throw, lie the holy places of Jews, Christians, and Muslims. Within this microcosm, each religion has marked and glorified its sacred sites, realizing in architecture the complex amalgam of praise, awe, and transcendence that is sacred art.
Sacred art is an interiorizing movement. It's calm, and there's light and silence. It leads you towards contemplation. And that is true for sacred art, if it's properly sacred, wherever it is.
To the faithful, the significance of religious art far exceeds its artistic merit, great though that may be, and on the rare occasions when its loss occurs, the impact is immense. In 1969, here in Jerusalem, just such a loss occurred. This is the extraordinary story of what followed. The revelations, the obstacles, the struggles, and the ultimate triumphs that brought about a re-evaluation of ancient traditions of religious art in the 21st century. Dominated by the historic Dome of the Rock, the old city of Jerusalem is a holy place for Christians, Jews, and Muslims. For Muslims, the Al-Aqsa mosque is a site of special reverence. It marks the place from which the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven, making it the third most holy site in Islam. And it is under the custodianship of the Hashemite royal family of Jordan in a sacred trust that goes back centuries.
Our family was the custodians of Jerusalem until 1967. The West Bank, including Jerusalem, East Jerusalem, was part of Jordan. In 1988 or 1987, I think it was, we said that we will no longer represent the people of the Palestinian people, and they will represent themselves. And so we severed ties with the West Bank. We became no longer responsible for the West Bank, except for Jerusalem, precisely. And our peace treaty with Israel in 1994 recognizes, the Israelis recognize our special significance, our custodianship of Jerusalem. And it still is under Hashemite custodianship.
The mosque has stood here for more than 1,000 years. For 800 of those years, the Imam preached the word of Allah at Friday prayers from the same spot, a minbar, similar to a pulpit in a Christian church. But this was no ordinary minbar. The Al-Aqsa minbar was known throughout Islam, and its fame went far beyond, attracting attention from experts and academics all over the world.
Now, all minbars are sacred objects, sacred to the word of Allah, but this one has a very, very particular significance for two reasons. One, it's a magnificent example of Islamic art from the heyday of Islamic art in the 12th century. And secondly, because it has a really remarkable history.
The story of the Al-Aqsa minbar is rooted in the Crusades. During the Middle Ages, roughly around the time that Britain was experiencing the Norman conquest, the eastern end of the Mediterranean, particularly that part known as the Levant, seemed to be a permanent battlefield. In this narrow strip of land, Christian Europe fought Arabs, Turks, and Kurds for control of what each regarded as its holy places.
The low point, from the Muslim point of view, came with the brutal taking of Jerusalem by the Christian Crusaders in 1099. It was a merciless rout and absolutely ruthless, and it looked as though the grip of the Christians on Jerusalem was unassailable. From then on, the entire Muslim focus was on getting Jerusalem back from the Christians, from the Europeans.
It took nearly 100 years, but so certain were the Islamic leaders of success that in 1168, the warrior leader, the Seljuk Sultan Nur al-Din, commissioned a fine minbar to be made in Aleppo in preparation for the triumphal return to Jerusalem.
This particular minbar was one of the most richly decorated pieces of sacred art, of Islamic art, ever conceived. And it was designed and made at the zenith of Islamic culture in the 12th century by the very finest craftsmen that could be found anywhere.
In 1187, Nur al-Din's successor, the great Kurdish warrior Saladin, finally triumphed over the Christian Crusaders and took back Jerusalem for Islam. One of his first acts was to rededicate the Al-Aqsa mosque and to install within it the celebratory minbar. From then onwards, it became known as the Minbar of Saladin, playing its part in the life of the mosque for the next 800 years, an enduring symbol of the Muslim triumph. Then, early in the morning of August the 21st, 1969, a fire broke out in the Al-Aqsa mosque. When the flames were finally extinguished, the ancient roof had been destroyed and the historic minbar lay in ashes. It was an agonizing blow, an unimaginable loss. The fire was started by a firebomb, and the Muslim world, outraged, suspected a Zionist plot. But the culprit turned out to be a Christian zealot, an Australian called Dennis Michael Rohan.
Israel. The trial of Dennis Michael Rohan was a top security affair. The prisoner was shielded by a bulletproof glass booth, but the Israelis ensured that the trial was conducted with the necessary legal dignity and formality. Although the plea was entered as not guilty, Rohan, seen here with his lawyer, later admitted starting the blaze but pleaded insanity. The 28-year-old accused claims to follow the teachings of an extreme Christian sect and says he was guided to fire the mosque after receiving a sign from God.
Restoring the damaged mosque was an urgent priority. King Hussein of Jordan moved quickly. The building was made safe, and before long the magnificent roof was restored, its richly ornamented ceiling glowing above the worshippers once more. The minbar was a more complicated problem. How to replace such an iconic treasure? A temporary substitute was put in place while a solution was sought. The initial idea, to replicate the original, seemed simple enough. But as it turned out, replacing the Minbar of Saladin was to be far from easy. For the late King Hussein and his successor, King Abdullah II, it became a lengthy and far-reaching quest, one that was to last more than 30 years.
It was a puzzle. The minbar was made in a remarkable way. It was made without any nails. And it was made according to sacred proportions. Sacred proportions to do with numbers. Numbers have, in, as it were, sacred geometry, a significance that they're not merely quantities, but also qualities. Nobody in the world could find the exact proportions again because there was no record of it.
First of all, there weren't any working drawings. There weren't any drawings of any kind to guide the designer. But perhaps more importantly, there just weren't the craft skills, the woodworking skills around. There didn't seem to be those skills to implement the design once it had been made. The skills just weren't there.
Almost undetected, the crafts of past centuries had vanished.
During the colonial age, Western countries, especially European countries, started to export to Islamic countries, Muslim countries, Western factory-made goods. And that destroyed the traditional guild system. And that in turn weakened the traditional crafts and guilds and arts and removed their socio-economic function in society. Of course, their spiritual function was still vibrant, but their socio-economic function in society was removed so that the guilds were gradually decimated.
This realization came as something of a shock, a wake-up call. Had the world really allowed priceless knowledge and skills developed over centuries to simply slip away? It was an alarming possibility. Yet the picture wasn't entirely gloomy. There were signs that the neglect of ancient skills had been noticed and was beginning to be reversed. What was unexpected was where this was happening. In Shoreditch, in the East End of London, a new school had been set up, inspired by Professor Keith Critchlow's pioneering work at the Royal College of Art. Its remit was to teach and foster the knowledge and skills of traditional Islamic and Eastern arts. If the location for this enterprise was surprising, equally so was the identity of its founder and supporter, the future head of the Church of England, the Prince of Wales.
When I saw the flower, all these parts were actually there. Yes. So.
Then it's a yes, I see. One of the reasons I was so keen to find a way of achieving this school was because I felt there was such a terrible danger of losing all the precious wisdom and the knowledge and understanding of where so many of the great traditional crafts and forms of art had come from, and architecture indeed. And we were in real danger of losing these very precious understandings.
Although the school teaches a range of traditional arts, its work does have a special emphasis.
It is fundamentally important that the school preserves the crafts of and the heritage of the Islamic world, because we believe that these have been disappearing at such a fast rate over the last few years. We have students from all over the world, from different cultural backgrounds, who come in to study this idea and to find a contemporary expression, which in a way is extending these traditions into the contemporary world.
The school teaches the principles on which traditional design is based, but it doesn't stop with theory. Students here are taught crafts, carefully learnt skills that have been handed down over generations.
The importance of preserving the craft is actually much more fundamental than just preserving techniques of making beautiful objects. It's about understanding a universal principle. It is a language which links us to the natural order of being. Craftsmanship from all over the world, whether it's from the Hindu tradition, the Muslim or the Christian tradition, has always understood that to create beauty in the world, it has to work on a level of inspiration. There is a sense of divine inspiration which expresses itself in the order of nature around us in the natural world.
Nature is itself governed by mathematical rules, from the symmetry of a cut apple to the structure of a crystal. The language of geometry is all around us, and there's a widespread sense that mathematics, and geometry in particular, is the language of the Creator.
Drawing of the relationship.
Nowhere is this connection clearer than in sacred geometry, a key aspect of traditional Islamic art, and a subject for which Professor Keith Critchlow is a fervent advocate.
So that's just to touch on that. Now what we're going to do, having got to here, let's find out how the Muslims, in their genius, took the pentagon apart into these pieces to enable them to do this extraordinary kind of decorative work that we see behind here and here and here. Okay, I shall strengthen my pentagon up on here. The main thing is that the core of our teaching has always been geometry. Socrates said, geometry opens the eye of perception, the only eye we've got, a single eye which tells us what the truth is. Our fleshly eyes, all they do is distract us by the world we're in. So to recover one's wholeness, one's singularity, then the study of geometry is the key to it.
The school in Shoreditch did not long remain alone in its mission to nurture ancient skills. Thousands of miles away, His Royal Highness Prince Ghazi of Jordan, drawing on the experience of the Prince's School in London, created a new college of traditional art and architecture in the university town of Al-Salt, near Amman.
Of course, we didn't have any craftsmen. And so, based upon the Prince of Wales's school, we decided that we must also do a school in Jordan dedicated to sacred Islamic art. Now, of course, sacred art is art based upon the principles of unity. It's not art by Muslims, it's art according to Islamic principles. And the only person in the world to have done that was, ironically, the Prince of Wales. And we got master craftsmen from Turkey, from Syria, from Egypt, from Morocco, from Indonesia. And so we created really, by the grace of God, a unique traditional Islamic art center here. And now we're exporting it. They want to set up a college in Lebanon, and Saudi Arabia, and Bahrain, and Egypt. And we're now exporting it and reintroducing traditional art into the Islamic world.
Together, these two centers of excellence are at last halting the loss of ancient knowledge and stimulating a rebirth of interest in traditional skills. It's a movement that goes beyond the boundaries of Islam to universal design principles.
Islam is far from being the only religion that uses sacred geometry in its art. In many ways, it's common to all religions. And this sacred geometry, this sacred art, is often used as an aid to contemplation, as a help with worship, but it's also to do with impressing people, with power and awe. It's wonderful, it's worshipful, but it's also a tiny bit scary. This sense of order and wonder has got a lot to do with the symmetries and proportions of what we're seeing or perceiving. It's like hearing a wonderful chord in music where all the elements are harmonious. And within nature itself, there's a lot of balance and harmony, which has been a great inspiration for religious art across the ages, not least Islamic art.
Geometric art need not limit the imagination. The 13th century Alhambra in Granada demonstrates the heights to which it can soar. But these masterpieces were built centuries ago. Would they be possible today? For the late King Hussein and his successor, King Abdullah II, for whom the restoration of the Al-Aqsa Minbar was so important, the answer appeared to be no. For more than 20 years, they had searched for someone able to produce workable designs. No one, even with the help of the most sophisticated computers, could crack Nur al-Din's complex Minbar code.
We did an international contest. We invited everybody in the world to participate. Nobody in the world was able to recreate the Minbar, which starts from a six-sided figure and creates an equilateral triangle by extending the lines of a regular six-sided figure, and without having any lines sticking out, as it were. Now, nobody could do that.
The schools in Oman and London had begun the process of training new designers, but the creation of master craftsmen is a lengthy business. Meanwhile, the Hashemite royal family continued their search. As they were doing so, a young engineer turned architect was pursuing a quest of his own.
Disney Euro Disney.
Minwar al-Mahed now lives with his wife and children in Oman. But Minwar's roots are in the deserts of Saudi Arabia, where he had been born into an old established Bedouin family. Despite his successful career, he found himself, as time went by, increasingly drawn to the traditions of his forebears.
First and foremost, I'm a Bedouin. I've studied everywhere in the West, and I was exposed to all the modern life and things. I'm living in modern times. I'm using different gadgets, the computer, the car, mobile phones, but those are not essential. Life is about the essentials. The most essential thing is to realize the truth. And so concentrate on what brings you nearer to that truth. I am a religious man. In the sense, it's a part of finding the truth, finding the origin of things. And in that sense, I am a religious man.
As Minwar's personal quest for truth continued, he found himself more and more fascinated by Islamic art, craft and architecture, and he too became concerned that many of the old skills had been lost. He began a process that continues to this day, traveling in the Middle East, observing and recording traditional craftsmen at work, ensuring that their skills would not vanish in a world increasingly dedicated to modern technology. But studying craftsmanship alone was not enough. Minwar became interested in the ideas that lay beneath what he was seeing.
At that period of time, I was reading metaphysics, philosophy and everything. So I really was looking deeper and deeper into things, and I wanted something that translates all those higher ideas, and those ideas that are universal.
Minwar finally found what he was looking for in a small bookshop in Damascus. It was a book called Islamic Patterns, and it was written by Professor Keith Critchlow, whose work led to the founding of the Prince's School in East London. Its effect upon Minwar was profound.
It talks about geometry and the basis of Islamic art. Right away, I realized that this book really talks about something which I wanted to know for some time.
Minwar used Keith Critchlow's erudite book to teach himself the principles and techniques of sacred geometry. For the next year, he devoted his time to studying the great designs of the past, discovering as he went a passion that was to shape his future. So when, after many dedicated years of searching, King Hussein of Jordan declared an international competition to find a design for the new minbar, Minwar al-Mahid was more than ready for the challenge. He applied.
If it wasn't that I found his book a year before that, and I had a year of practicing how these things would be done and realizing how these things could be done, it was no way that I would enter the competition and no way that I would know how to do it in the first place. So I wouldn't embarrass myself. But thanks to Keith, I wasn't embarrassed. I did it. They gave everyone a photograph of a panel that they wanted redrawn according to Islamic patterns, and they themselves did not know that this is based on a science, and that science is geometry. So I did the detailed drawings, and we did a little bit of animation because they were interested in the reconstruction of the minbar itself.
Minwar's geometry skills were more than enough for him to produce those first designs. But he knew little about the construction of the ancient minbars, and he needed to know more. He headed first for Aleppo, where the original minbar had been made, so many centuries before. Would there still be clues for him there? Just across the road from the Grand Mosque, he made a crucial discovery. The Halawaya school, where the original minbar was made, still stands, and within it there is a mihrab, a prayer niche, whose quality drew Minwar immediately.
نعم اللي صنعه هو أبي الحسن محمد الحراني مذكور اسمه في الأعلى.
هو نفس هذا الاسم لقيناه وين أبي الحسن الحراني.
أبي الحسن محمد الحراني.
The mihrab was indeed built by the very same person who designed the Minbar of Saladin.
محطوط نفس الاسم. معناها هو نفس المحراب اللي صنع مع المنبر.
مع المنبر نعم الصانع واحد كان.
الصانع واحد.
أبي الحسن محمد.
والله هذه ممتازة.
Finding the mihrab was a turning point for Minwar. At last he was able to study firsthand the work of the master, to get inside the mind of the man whose designs he must somehow emulate. Confident that he now fully understood the task ahead, Minwar finalized the designs for the minbar. In all, the competition required 3 submissions, testing different aspects of the design. After more than 20 years of waiting, there were to be no mistakes. Minwar triumphed in every part of the contest. The new minbar would be built to his design.
We couldn't find anyone in the world to do it except him. And he worked it out from first principles. And he was completely new, but he knew that he'd studied sacred geometry, and he knew how it had to be done. It was only one way it could possibly be done. And when the competition was announced, he took it upon his own initiative, having studied the sacred art, to enter the contest, and he won. And then there was another contest because nobody could believe that this engineer knew the secret, and much more experienced engineers didn't know. So they agreed to another contest, and he also won that as well. And so eventually they gave it to him.
The Prince's School in Shoreditch was so impressed by Minwar's achievement that he was invited to submit his winning designs as the basis for a PhD, an invitation that Minwar readily accepted.
I got fascinated by the book and fascinated by the man who wrote it. So I wanted to meet Keith since that time, because I thought this man knows a lot more than what's in that book. Professor Keith, Master of Geometry.
Lovely to see you.
It's good to see you. How are you?
Come again.
Thank
Use
you.
this room here now. Not too much trouble on the flight?
No, not really.
Would you like to sit there?
Keith is fascinating. He's dynamic, and he doesn't stress his point of view. He just points certain things and certain facts and truths of geometry.
I shall be most interested. So maybe you could show me the big ones you've done.
What I brought here, they're not too big, but at least they explain certain things. But they'll be drawn to the craftsman one-to-one on pieces. This is a drawing of the whole minbar. The two sides of it.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful.
For Keith Critchlow, Minwar's meticulous, harmonious drawings are a triumph.
Because of the science of geometry, everything fit in the exact, precise place. I was fairly confident that everything will fit in, because I knew that in geometry it's an objective art.
Exactly, sure.
On the other side, you find the same story, but told in a different shapes.
Different shapes, yes.
As we've analyzed this one to be the mean orbit of Mercury,
right.
and the mean orbit of the Earth, and the mean orbit of Jupiter.
Fantastic.
But here on this diagram, this square is really, I think, the relationship between Earth and the Moon.
Right, right.
If they're put together, the Moon would fit exactly here on the sides, and it would draw this square
wonderful,
here.
Wonderful.
And it's just amazing. And these are the different photographs where we took the patterns from, and this is where the door, this is the inside of the door, and this is the outside, with two different patterns.
I remember, it's a beautiful pattern, that one.
These drawings show with great detail, extraordinary detail and clarity, how every single element of the minbar was to be reconstructed. This is an insight into the mindset of 12th century Islam. So these are the external details, and then you turn over and you've got what happens behind them. These are the structural pieces of wood that hold the decorative details together. So here's the engineering, each piece carefully numbered. And here we've got lots of little decorative motifs with inlay of ebony and ivory, which occur at certain points in the geometry. In all, this book contains instructions for the making of over 16,000 pieces of wood. This was a really remarkable design project.
Minwar had cracked the code of Saladin's minbar, and every detail of the design was complete. But how was the minbar to be built? The crisis of the reconstruction had revealed not only a crucial shortage of designers, but an equally acute lack of fine craftsmen.
You could solve the puzzle on paper. Now, to construct it is even a more difficult job. It's really an intricate work, extremely difficult. So we needed craftsmen specialized in all the different arts. One can find them in the minbar.
Minwar cast his net wide. By early 2003, he had assembled skilled craftsmen from Turkey, Egypt, Jordan, and Indonesia. They came together at the college at Al-Aqsa, where a workshop had been dedicated to the building of the minbar. Under King Abdullah II's sponsorship, the building of the minbar began. The craftsmen came together with no common language, sharing only their skill and dedication. Together, they began the long and patient process of making the thousands of pieces of the minbar puzzle. The wood they're using is walnut, donated by the government of Turkey. Parts of the design are carved onto larger wooden pieces. Minwar's drawings are pasted onto the wood as guides. All the craftsmen working here are devout Muslims. For them, this is much more than a job.
Alhamdulillah, saya melihat dengan kerjaan ini, saya merasa senang dan sangat spesial karena lain daripada yang lain. Dengan desainer dan para muhandis yang bagus tentunya.
طبعا إشي مهم وفريد من نوع لأنه بيحتوي على فن عالي من الفن الإسلامي اللي هو رمز المنبر الخطيب لإمام المسجد، فهو بيحتوي على رمزية عالية في الفن وخصوصا الفن الإسلامي. وبعدين يعني مكوناته من جيومتري ومن تصميم هندسي ونباتي إلها معنى كبير في حياة الإنسان أو حياة الإنسان المسلم بالأخص يعني.
Parts of the design are highlighted with ebony and ivory. As with the original, no nails, screws or glue are used. In each panel, an interlocking structure holds the smaller pieces together. The measurements must be exact. One minute variation anywhere, and the pattern will not work.
Tabii bu işi her şeyden önce Allah için severek yapmak gerekiyor. Çok büyük özveri gerekiyor. Tabii Mescid-i Aksa'nın işi olması dolayısıyla bir kat daha fazla tabii. Bu işi, bu minberin kündekarısını yapmak da bizlere nasip oldu.
The workmen who worked on the minbar and on all sacred arts do it as an act of devotion. And it is an integral part of the spiritual ambience that a religious civilization creates.
The minbar is created panel by panel. The fitting of the final pieces in any panel can be a tense moment. Not only must all the pieces fit, they must all stay firmly in place when the panel is raised to its vertical position. It all works. The last of the panels is completed. "12 years after the competition was first announced, the minbar is finally assembled. The craftsmen who have given years of their lives to the project gather together.
والله أحسن من هيك ما في. فرحان بشكل يعني.
نجتمع مع بعض إن شاء الله بعد سنين راح كنا نقعد ونفكر في الموضوع ونقول يعني الشرف إن كنا أن اشتغلنا في المشروع هذا.
no matter how you visualize the final end, when you see it happening and see it, all these bits and pieces that you've worked with, all the 16,000 pieces that put together with no glues and no nails, all of a sudden appear as one unit. That's the unity, and that's what we feel as something which is, it gives us also great humbleness, because we see that what our ancestors have done and what the art, in fact, that art has a meaning and not art for art's sake. It is very, very important to know that although this is a piece of Islamic art, it's in fact based on universal principles. And so it is not only for the joys of the Muslims, it's a joy for everyone that could see it.
What I was so proud about, if I'm allowed to have a tiny bit of pride, is that it was the school and Dr. Al-Mahaid who had rediscovered the underlying geometric patterns that had enabled this great minbar to be built in the first place, with equally as much love and devotion and skill and dedication and care on the part of all the wonderful craftsmen who put so much from their hearts and souls into this work.
There has been a tremendous, Muslims have woken up saying, yes, this is what art is, traditional art is, this is what Islamic art is. And people all over the Islamic world, even in places like Saudi Arabia, are waking up and saying, well, look, this is what we've been doing is wrong. We have to reintroduce this. And I think King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia has commissioned a similar minbar for Mecca and for Medina from our college. So there's been a tremendous trickle-down, as it were.
The positive effects of the minbar quest go even further, stimulating a rebirth of interest in traditional craft and design, and a flowering of creativity in Islamic sacred art. And not all the new work copies designs from the past. This new mosque in Amman, commissioned in 2005 by King Abdullah II, was designed by Khaled Azam, principal of the Prince's School in London, using those same principles of design to express modern ideas. The minbar was unveiled by King Abdullah II exactly 37 years after his father, the late King Hussein, had set out to replace the lost masterpiece. It had been a longer, harder journey than anyone had imagined, but the result was a triumph.
I think he was fully satisfied with the minbar. That was a complete and accurate recreation, and it was in itself a piece of wholly authentic, beautiful, traditional Islamic art. That was a great achievement. There was, of course, universal positive reaction in the Islamic world, a restoration of Islamic pride in its traditional arts, and also a feeling that Muslims have, in a small way, repaid some of their commitment towards Jerusalem.
Now all that remained was to transport the minbar back to Jerusalem, to finally take its place in the Al-Aqsa mosque. But even this was not going to be straightforward. In the summer of 2006, the tensions building up between Israel and her neighbors erupted into a full-scale war. The move was put on hold, and the minbar stayed in its workshop in Jordan. It looked like a gloomy ending.
People and the world is becoming crazy. But the answer is, as you're dealing with the timeless, you're really not creating this for a crazy moment. It's beyond that. I am optimistic that the minbar will return to its place in Al-Aqsa Mosque. The culminating point is, for me, my colleagues who have worked on it, the craftsmen, is to see it back in Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem, and a preacher climbing the stairs, a symbol of climbing the stairs of heaven and preaching the word of God that's coming from above. And that would be the final objective of what we have been doing. And I think everyone else is waiting for that moment.
At last, 6 months after its completion, the situation had calmed. Suddenly, the minbar was on the move. Carefully packed into boxes, the minbar began the difficult journey through a troubled political landscape to its new home.
Sacred art is to do with beauty, and beauty is a universal language. Beauty can break down barriers better than interfaith dialogue. And so this revival of traditional Islamic art has been the best messenger and the best barrier breaker between Islam and the West. Because people come and they see that this is beautiful. It's not beautiful because it's Islamic, it's just beautiful. It's universal. And so people automatically come away from traditional Islamic art, non-Muslims, with a positive image of Islamic civilization and even a love for Islamic civilization, something which no amount of academic talking and interfaith dialogue can do so effectively and so existentially.
At last, nearly 40 years after the destruction of the original, The new minbar is installed in the Al-Aqsa mosque in Jerusalem. Its arrival makes international news.
It's important for Jordan, it's important for Muslims in Islam, it's important for the whole world, I think.
It's taken the dedication and vision of 2 kings and 2 princes and the work of scholars and craftsmen from around the world. Once again, the image of Saladin's gift rises above the faithful.
أشهد أن